So here we're in the east side of the house. This was a large bed chamber, and you'll see in a minute it's divided into two parts, just like Jefferson's chamber, by a bed alcove that is in the middle of the room. That's another one of his favorite things that he got accustomed to in Paris when he lives there for 5 years, were these beds that are part of the structure. You don't have to sacrifice a window, a fireplace, or a door for your bed, for your furniture. You can put it, as part of the structure in the middle of things. Why did the later people that lived here brick up 8 windows in the house? In a house that Jefferson builds for maximum light and air? Probably to put big pieces of furniture against the wall. That's the only reason I can think of, because the house became darker and less airy. And in fact, one of the great descriptions of the house, and the only one really from a visitor, there are only a few visitors that Jefferson invites here over 14 years. One was an Englishman, and he wrote a description of the house, and he ended it by saying it was like a French chateau. So he was an Englishman who sees Poplar Forest not as American, but as European. And that really is the flavor of French architecture with maximum light and air. The French almost live outdoors because the climate is perfect and there are no bugs. But Jefferson, coming back from Europe, always has the biggest windows, more windows, the skylight. And so all of these, are part of the Jeffersonian creation that we can call Jeffersonian classicism. It's his own brand of things. So in this room that we are going to leave undone, unfinished, we can see that Jefferson is building everything out of solid brick. He builds better than you have to. So these inner walls in any other house would have been wood. He's building them out of 12 inches of thickness of brick. And that's probably why the house survives the fire in 1845, because it's so solidly built. Even though all the wood parts would have burned off, it's still the same shape in plan because of the quality of construction. So here is a fireplace. There are 15 fireplaces in the house on 2 levels. Because of the geometry of the octagon, every big fireplace chimney mass, which is a big triangular mass, has a fireplace that's pointing in 2 directions to serve each end of a room, whether it's the full octagon room or a half octagon room. This one, though, was one of the great discoveries during investigation, because in 1846, when they rebuilt the house and they brick up 8 windows, they also brick up this fireplace. What's the significance of that? When we open it up, it's a very pristine fireplace that wasn't altered after Jefferson's time, whereas all the other fireplaces got made more shallow for coal burning grates. This gave us a lot of physical evidence. There are ghost marks that show where the pieces of trim came. I know you can't see it, but there's a little score line here. There's a score line here telling the carpenter where to put the trim. There are 2 iron lintels holding up this flat arch. There's evidence of the parging or the finish to help prevent the bricks from being burned out. There's some paint that we can analyze, showing that every couple of years when the fireplace got real sooty, they would paint it. And they always paint it brick red. There are little iron pins that are stuck on each side of the back. And there's a little line up on top that shows that those pins were holding an iron fireback that we can see on the other side of the room. So this one fireplace was then the model to go and look at the other 14 fireplaces to compare. If you knew that you had evidence on this one in a certain place, you could go look in that other area and find that evidence. Sometimes what you're looking for is maybe a piece of evidence as big as your fingernail. And let's say this is the evidence. That's the answer. That little piece of mortar. You can find a lot of answers, but the critical thing is, what is the question? What does that evidence mean? If you don't have the question, it looks like nothing. It looks like a little piece of mortar. So that's why we had to have all the proper time to come up with the questions. So if you have a question about this fireplace and you know it's in this location, you can go to another fireplace and find that evidence, and that's the answer. And that's why really the questions are sometimes more important than the evidence and the answers, because if you don't have that time to answer the question, like most restorations don't, then somebody's guessing or doing it wrong. So in this case, we examine these walls like big documents over and over and over. And it's only when you have that new question that you go back and you find the answer. So that's why, restoration can be as good or as bad as the process. And the process is determined first by the board of directors who runs the place, and then by the staff, and then maybe by the consultants, and then maybe you throw in the advisors. It's complicated. So Poplar Forest has always done the right things for the right reason, and that's why we've become a model of doing this. And a lot of places will say, we wish we could do it like that, meaning they might be hampered with those other nasty things called time and money, or not having enough money to hire the best consultants, or needing to do something by a certain date when you're having a celebration or whatever. So again, this is all about the process, and early on you establish a philosophy of things that you aren't going to do. So in here, one philosophy was we did not want our staff or our tour guides staying in the house, using the house between tours, because once you get modern people using the house, then you're going to need the right lights, you're going to need a restroom, you're going to need the right heating and air conditioning. We did what was correct here for the house as our biggest artifact. So we want to conserve an artifact. It just happens to be an entire house. So this is a reproduction chair, which works perfectly for our purposes because we can have somebody sit on this if they need to sit on a tour. If this was an original chair, it'd be roped off. You couldn't get close to it. You'd have to have a certain temperature, humidity in the house. We are one of the luckiest house museums. We don't have to fight the battles of temperature and humidity because we have reproduction furniture. The other reason to have reproduction furniture is in the nice times of the year, we can do this, open the window, and you get the breeze. More importantly, a visitor, even subconsciously, gets the sense that this is more of a real house and not a museum because you're hearing the birds, you're feeling the breeze. This is a very big part of authenticity at Poplar Forest. And if you looked at the outside of the house today, you'd see some windows have the louvered blinds closed on them. That is the original type of air conditioning, which is to keep the sun out and heating the house. We use our louvered blinds. We're probably the only house museum in the country that uses them like you're supposed to control the temperature. It also gives you a certain kind of light and a certain appearance on the outside. So again, all these little things are adding up to doing it correctly. Does every visitor know that you're doing it correctly? No. If you are a professional, you might recognize these things, but most people just come with an implied trust that you are doing things right. And again, maybe they only come away with the big story, but I think it's the little things that add up to the atmosphere of authenticity. So these windows, are another story. Big glass, small muttons, English blocks that he got from England. The sash cord that holds the weights. And this is another modern feature. The tops are hung and the bottoms are hung on weights, which wasn't common. The cord that holds the weights, we had to get custom made in Holland because it's made out of hemp. And back when we did these, there was no legal source of hemp in the United States. So we had to get this from Holland. And we know Jefferson has a hemp crop because hemp was the best thing to make rope out of, or sacks, or slave clothing. And anyway, that's another example of having to find the right material and the right feature to put it all together. And we have kind of gone through Jefferson's own experience in uncanny ways when he had to wait sometimes years to get the right material because he didn't want to substitute it. He knew what he wanted and he had to wait for it. So now we're going to go look at a very important artifact.